Welcome to Not Just Ads, the show where B2B brands discover how creator-led content drives pipeline, builds trust, and grows long-term brand equity. Each episode, we speak with business leaders, founders, and creators who are defining their categories. I'm your host, Marcus Sherwin, and this is the creator economy for B2B. Hello and welcome today to Not Just Ads, the creator economy for B2B. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Vidhi Kumar. Vidhi has a wealth of experience in the B2B growth space. She's most recently, just over 2 years ago, launched a co-founder of Cardboard. Cardboard is a subscription monitoring service that helps people take control of their costs. I would leave it to Vidhi to explain more in detail, but I think it's a product and a service that's really well needed in the SaaS space. I'm delighted to be joined by her on the show today. Vidhi, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Marcus, for having me. Lovely to meet you.
Great. Yes, you too. Likewise. Maybe you could tell us for the users before we get into Cardboard and you can tell us about it. And I'd like to get a better understanding or even for the listeners as well in terms of how you got to where you are today. Was it something that you always wanted to get into, or was it something that you discovered during your career? Or maybe you could just tell us how that all came about.
So it actually started in college. I had two options. I could either go into journalism or advertising, and I liked advertising. So I moved into that. I did internships there and tried to figure the space out. And then I realized that advertising in companies sits in the marketing department. So then that's like a much larger scope. And that's how I sort of came into marketing, because I was very interested in how do you build markets? How do you generate demand? What's the best way to get people to buy? And that's basically what got me into marketing.
Very good. Very interesting. And you're based in Oslo with Cardboard, right? And with the CMO role that you were working in prior to Cardboard, you were based in Oslo as well, no?
Yes. So I've been in Norway for the last 8 years.
Okay, very good.
And counting.
Okay, great. Maybe you could just share a little bit more for the listener, like the ecosystem in Norway in terms of the tech world there. I mean, the Nordics in general, and I know you mentioned this off air, a lot of people get confused sometimes between Sweden and Norway, and they're both separate countries. But as a whole in the Nordics, and I saw it in LinkedIn as well, it's a thriving ecosystem. There's a huge amount of successful companies that have come out of both Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland. You have Slush as well, which I believe was on a couple of weeks ago. It's a very happening scene up there. But specifically in Norway, maybe you could just share in terms of how the tech scene is there, why you decided to launch Cardboard there as well. I think people are kind of like really interested to see how the scene is there and maybe could share a little bit about people maybe that are unfamiliar with it.
So the interesting thing about Norway is we have big neighbors. Obviously, Sweden has a very thriving tech ecosystem and very well-known brands. We have a lot of oil, of course, but when you say tech startup, there are so many tech startups here. Maybe you don't even know they're Norwegian that have come from here. And Remarkable, for example, is one of them, and I can list like a lot more. What's happening in the Norway ecosystem now is there's like this renewed vigor over the last, I would say, perhaps decade of people who have come up with the desire and the ambition to build out of Norway. So that makes it a very interesting ecosystem for talent that has to come together to make that happen. You'll find a lot of internationals working in the startup space, because when you're building a startup, you just need all this talent coming in really quickly. And that's where I got my first break in Norway as well. It was a blockchain startup that was looking for. Interestingly, I got into planning and operations there and then moved back into marketing. But it's also a very good ecosystem here, where people give you feedback, which is very clear, and that you can, it's like yes or no. It's very direct, which helps you kind of figure out, okay, what's working, what's not working very fast. And once you sort of get that product market fit here, I would say Norway is a great market to test. It's a small market, of course, it's 5 million people, and even smaller when you look at the startup ecosystem. But it's a community that's very well connected and people know each other. There is a culture of pay it forward. People look at, other industries like the alpine skiing team and this culture of attacking Vikings that they've built. People look at what, Ireland is doing in the football, and that culture of paying it forward is very much there. And we're trying to build more of it here. So it's a nice friendly ecosystem to build a company in.
Yeah, it's interesting. How do you think the government are there a lot of incentives for companies let's say if you've Norwegian founders that are based outside Norway, but to come home and start a company there or to attract talent as well from other countries, are the government quite supportive in terms of making that process very easy for founders?
Well, I think definitely the intent is there. Innovation Norway does what it can with the mandate. Obviously, we feel more can be done, as we always will. That's why we are here. And also, I would say Oslo Business Region and Trondheim and Stavanger, all the municipalities are doing something to build this system in their respective communas. And so I think the intent is there. What we desperately need is also the ambition to compete at a level where, let's say, somebody in Sweden is doing or somebody in Denmark is doing. That ambition is there in startup founders. I think with the government, a lot more work can be done. It is already being done, but can be done more from a practical perspective. And I love the way London does it, for example, or even Dublin, the way it's doing it. You're creating opportunities for startups, trying to give them access to markets outside the home market,
Yeah.
which is really good. Going to exhibitions and shows and just taking these young startups to meet these customers, which they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do themselves. That I think would be really cool to do more of here.
Yeah. Enterprise Ireland, I think in Ireland it's similar size in population. I think it's about 5 million, but Enterprise Ireland in Ireland have done a good job of how they can help companies sell into other markets outside Ireland. I think some people there's a lot of, what would I say, there's debate, probably domestic debate in Ireland of like how they can do it more effectively and stuff. But I think for that, just having a support base of helping and facilitating people to sell into other markets, they've done that really well with Enterprise Ireland. I think it's done quite well. The whole tax base thing of the a foreign direct investment from American companies setting up in Ireland has been like probably a big part of Ireland's success. That's kind of another thing, I guess. But it's I think the challenge that they have is really the infrastructure, which I think Norway actually does quite well. And what I mean by infrastructure in terms of trains and roads and all that, I think Norway is really leading the way there in comparison to Ireland, whereas Ireland has the means in terms of government organisations, but the infrastructure of actually enabling people then to attract more talent, I think is a big challenge in Ireland at the moment. But yeah, every country, I guess, has their challenges of like trying to get to the next phase.
I think even with Norway, for example, what I think is really good in Norway is a very stable society that has a very strong emphasis on work-life balance. So you as a founder can build a company while also build a family. It's not, you don't sacrifice everything at the altar of growth, right? And I think that is something that Norway does really well, that they have figured out how to co-opt a whole ecosystem to help you. Whether it's the Barnehage, which is the nurseries where kids go to, whether it's the school system, whether it's after school activities that, you as a parent are expected to show up at. I have 2 kids, so I know it's like a lot to manage. But I'm able to do that because the system encourages it. People like it that you show up and you volunteer for things in addition to working. It can get quite a bit. So it's about very tight time management, but you can make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. But culturally speaking in Norway, then, if you look at America, it's kind of like this growth at all costs, and it's the culture now. What's the what is it? 9 to 9. Exactly, 996. And that's fine at a certain part in your life. But as you know, when you have kids and so you need to find a balance and for everything to be sustainable. Like, how do you think in Norway, you mentioned like that they support in that, but like generally speaking in the culture of work-life balance, is that across the board, even for people maybe that are like just out of college and they have the time probably to maybe do 12-hour days, but I think there's burnout and there's all kinds of negative consequences to that in the more long term. How do you see that kind of like out of college generation? Do they embrace that work-life balance as well? And they kind of see that, okay, look, work is important, achieving your goals is important, building a big company is part of that too. But there is also another life as well.
Yeah, I think that really depends. So before I moved to Norway, I did work in 996. I'm from India, and I worked Saturdays, and Saturdays were full days. And if you left at 6 o'clock, it was like, are you leaving early?
Yeah.
Like, no, for real, I have a life. So I can tell you frankly, first-hand experience. And I had a 1-year-old child. So
Yeah.
it was quite a bit to manage. My
Yeah.
son was basically raised by my in-laws. But the point is, I wouldn't want to do that. And you're right, there are quite a few negative consequences. At the end of the day, it's really a personal choice. When I was young and I didn't have kids, for sure, I'd work even on Sundays, right? But even then, it's like, what are you just working for? The point that Norway encourages is you are a multifaceted personality, and it's important to build that. Which I think even kids out of college, or while they do work a lot, they also do want to go skiing. They
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have a life after work because that's where your networks are built.
Yeah.
That's where connections are built. And Norway,
Definitely.
and I think a lot of countries are very network driven. You're not building networks sitting behind a desk in the office
Yeah.
12 hours a day.
Yeah. No, 100%. How do you think in terms of though, with that, you mentioned that you were in the 996 for a while before you moved to Norway. Do you think that if you had stayed in that situation, is it sustainable over time? When you see, like you mentioned about building a network, you can't do that behind your desk. And that's a big component to building a company, to have contacts, whether it's hiring talent, investment, whatever else may be. But do you think that countries like in that people can actually sustain that long term? Or now, when you actually see it from both perspectives, you see it from the work-life balance versus 996. What do you think for actually building a company can be more effective in the long run?
No, it's very sustainable for the company, right? If you don't care about your employees, one person is burnt out, you just replace them with someone else. So it's a very sustainable model in a company that only cares about profits, where people are interchangeable. But if you as a company are someone who understands that people are human beings and that you do want them to have full lives, you would not subject them to 996, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
It's of course voluntary if you want to do it because let's say you don't have kids and basically this is what you want to do, you can. But overworking sometimes is not very efficient. So you need to be efficient in what you're doing. Whether it takes you 9 hours a day or 8 hours a day, that's really up to you and how you do your job.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think in Europe, it depending on what part of Europe, you can see that during my time in LinkedIn, you visit different offices, and in some of the offices, you can see everyone is gone at 5:30. And if you look at like kind of the efficiencies in terms of how certain markets grow, it doesn't always correlate that because people work longer in the day that the market is growing more or anything. It's really how efficient you are, but also I think culture plays a part as well. If you're in, say, Southern Europe, it's the day starts a bit later, so therefore it finishes a bit later. So there's other components, I suppose, that play a part as well. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about Cardboard, how the idea came about, and where it is now. We talked a bit off air, but for the listeners, I think the solution is really relevant, very interesting, and very applicable to a lot of different sectors as well.
So the idea essentially, we approached it from different ways, but I would say Lars Cisse, he's been a CFO for a long time and he's currently group CFO at XXL. He had this idea that he had faced this problem a long time. And then he pulled in Andreas, Jacob, and Stein Magnus as the developers, bounced it off them, and kind of like, does this make sense? And then I came in as the growth co-founder, and we were all looking at it differently because his perspective as a CFO was he was just spending way too many, hours trying to figure out how many tools you have, how much we're spending on it, who has the receipts, back ID, authentication for approvals, which was a waste of time. I had a long list from the accountant at the end of each month with a lot of reds on missing receipts and what tool is this because the billing center was completely different. And I felt like that was a waste of my time to do that. And I wanted to automate it. And my other co-founders who were developers were looking at more like, this is really inefficient. We need to get access to tools and we need to have that more streamlined. So we approached it in different ways, but we all landed up on the same solution,
Yeah.
which was Cardboard. So that also works when we build the product. Those are the discussions we have. Like, how would the marketing team use this? How would the tech team use this? How would the finance team use this? And really build a well-rounded product for companies.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think you see, and I guess the bigger the organization as well, there's a huge amount of tools that are being used. And probably if you see, when you look at like, okay, somebody signs up for something for some project and then they maybe use it for 2 months and they don't have a need for it as much anymore. if you multiply that by like a number of teams, there's probably a huge amount of waste that you see. Whereas a tool like Cardboard can you can see an overview straight away of what tools you have, what's being used, what's not. What do you find is when people are using the tool, like what's the biggest feedback that you get since companies that have implemented it?
It's the feeling of control that we finally now know how many software subscriptions we're actually paying for. That's the first question people don't have an answer to. It's always lowballed. You think it's 5, 10 until you start using it and you're like, we have 30, 40 subscriptions. Like, who is using this? We had a customer who found out that they were paying for Typeform for 2 years and nobody was using it. And then you hear stories like, okay, somebody has left, but you're still paying for their Microsoft 365. It's like you don't realize actually. And we have looked at data. SaaS spend is growing at 15 to 20% annually, but estimates vary between 20 to 50% of those licenses are actually wasted. And teams they don't know how much they're actually spending. They sort of underestimated by almost 300%. So you could be spending 4 times more on SaaS than you actually know, because that's only the SaaS you're seeing you're buying. You're not seeing what your employees are buying. You're not seeing stuff you're paying for that you're not using anymore. And so it's a silent drain on IT budget.
Yeah, definitely. When you go to market the tool, then what are I guess cost saving is one thing, but what's the main, like the ICP that you're normally targeting? Who's your like ideal customer in terms of company size or profile, or who would be generally like first customers?
So we target essentially SMBs that are growing. So a lot of scale ups, you have 50 or more employees and you're growing at a really healthy rate. And typically it is the CFO or CTO who are the ones who feel the most pain. And so those are the ones we see usually adopt the tool first, either the finance team or the tech team. And those are the ones we double down on, and especially companies that use a lot of tech. So either you're building a tech product yourself or you're using a lot of tech. Those are our ICP essentially.
And then when you're going to kind of target those users, is it mostly LinkedIn that you would use based on kind of like first party data that you would have there? Or would there be other platforms as well that you find effective?
So I'm platform agnostic. I have tried a lot of different platforms, but I have to say LinkedIn has performed the best across the channels that we have tried over the last 2 years in terms of really reaching out to our ICP, whether it's to build awareness, whether it's to build engaging content that adds value back. So I would say LinkedIn is a good part of our strategy. And we're doing also a lot with LinkedIn as a platform is changing, right? So we're also getting opportunities to try new things such as thought leadership content and thought leader ads, which have very healthy engagement rates for us across, whenever we do one of those. And those take a lot of time to produce because, as the name says, they're thought leader ads, right? So you have to be very curated in what you put into it. But we find the effort it takes to make one really pays off in us reaching our ICP in a very non-technical, let's talk to you as human beings kind of way. And let's show the human side of the company. We are people at the end of the day. The vibe coding, hype hasn't replaced us all. So we're still humans building a very human-centered product with a lot of automation.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting how the thought leader ads are working well for you as well. What do you think in terms of, since you've scaled to 200 customers already, I believe?
Yeah, we are over 230 actually. I just double checked.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what's been the most challenging part of scaling to 230 customers?
I think the first step was really trying to fine tune our ICP. In the beginning, we didn't know, right? So we tried different industries, different company sizes, different profiles. And over the years, we've realized we've pivoted in terms of who we want to focus on just to see where we are getting the most traction from. So I would say that has been the biggest learning. Obviously, as a startup, you believe everybody deserves this product. Everybody needs this product. That's what you believe. But who buys is sometimes very different from who needs. And so for us, finding our niche and finding areas in which we have the ability to win is something that we have learned as a team. And also, once we have that, it's different channels. So what channels work best to reach those people? Both of those have been a learning in parallel.
Agnostic, but what's your opinion in terms of how AI is evolving for being discovered. Are you seeing that that's kind of playing into your growth play as well, of like appearing on LLMs, and you seeing that with like kind of traffic as well of people discovering you via there?
We just did a project on that, on SEO and LLMs, and just to see what it would take to rank in LLMs. And I think it's an interesting space. LLMs still are quite small in the overall search traffic. So unless you have some really strong sort of resources available to consistently make this happen in LLMs, I would say it takes a lot of time and it's not something that we want to focus on right now. So fundamentally, I think it gives companies that already have a very good SEO strategy in place an advantage to appear in LLMs, because what you have to do is basically follow the same principles, but just make few tweaks to rank in LLMs, right? And that's much easier if you have an existing setup in place. For us, I think we have to take calls on where we want to put our resources. We are a small team and we're growing, but it's still always a question of what we spend our time on, what we spend our budget on. And even for us, it was a choice between the different channels. So actually, outbound sales, the good old fashioned cold calling, really worked. So we do that as well. So outbound sales and inbound traffic through LinkedIn and referrals are really our two biggest growth levers.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that about outbound sales, because every time there's always some kind of people speaking in these absolutes of saying like, cold calling is dead, this doesn't work anymore, AI search is the new thing, and I think depending on the product, depending on who the customer is, it works for different people. We've heard it before where white papers don't work. White papers do work in cybersecurity and other things as well. They still work very effectively. So I'm always kind of suspicious of people that talk in these absolutes of what does and doesn't work. I think it's really relevant for the sector,
Yeah,
knowing on
exactly.
people that are in the space.
Yeah. And just also because you'd mentioned the use of AI, right? What we're using AI for, we use Clay quite a bit. And Clay is such an amazing tool. It's just you can do so much with it. It's an expertise in itself to really leverage Clay. So the way we are using tools like Clay, Apollo, etc., are how do we make our sales team more efficient in research, in prospecting? Can we build those workflows and systems so they don't have to do everything manually? And that's what we are using AI for. How do you make the human processes more efficient? But we are not looking to replace them. So I don't
Yeah.
think AI SDRs are something we have checked out, but we don't feel comfortable using. We still believe it's the personal touch that really makes the difference in sales. But we do want to make our sales teams more efficient. And that's what our application of AI really is in.
How do you use them to make the sales reps then more effective? Like, what are kind of some of the tactics that you use that save time from those tools like Clay and Apollo, or anything else that you use?
Think so if we put it in three different maybe circles and there's an overlap, the GTM engineering skill is quite a technical skill, right? You need a deep understanding of the products and there are so many documentations you need to get that and to make it work with your CRM. We use HubSpot, for example, to make it work there and make sure that becomes a source of truth. So your sales team is not referring to like 10 different tools trying to put this together. So what we looked at the engineering side is just how do we simplify all this information coming into our CRM and what can we pull from our backend, because there's a backend system as well, right? That has some information. So how do we structure all these tools in a way that HubSpot becomes sort of your source of truth? And the second thing is the processes, right? So how can we make processes so that all the sales team are working in a similar way while still giving enough flexibility to bring your own flavor to it? And the third part is the creative side. At the end of the at the end of the day, sales is a very creative process, right? So how you get a person to say yes is an art in itself. So we want to make sure that you get sort of enough training and inputs so that that part also continues. And I think that's where a lot of the overlap with marketing comes in as well, because each of these, the process, the systems, the creative aspect of selling, can do certain things. What you can do with marketing is just exponential. So it's that what we want to leverage, the exponentiality that marketing can bring in, while the really grassroots level touch that the sales team can bring in, supported by the right systems and processes at the back end.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I guess once you have the traction there and you have the effective sales team, marketing amplifies it in terms of what you can do and who you can reach as well.
Yeah, and I worked in companies where, both of these have been at loggerheads because
Yeah.
it's like sales versus marketing. And I've just always, from the start of my career, I started my career in L'Oreal in sales and marketing. So I got to see both sides
Yeah.
and trade punches on both sides. So I know that the company can succeed when these two departments are the best friends. They
Yeah.
really are.
Yeah.
They are
Yeah.
in the trenches. They are in the front line. They protect a lot of the company. They should be best friends. And that's
Yeah.
what we're hoping to do at Cardboard.
Yeah. It makes so much sense what you're saying. I think the larger the organization, though, and I've worked with in LinkedIn, I've managed enterprise accounts, and it was always the same challenge of getting sales and marketing to talk to each other. And at the end of the day, the function is very similar. Some people would say, okay, it's not. But at the end of the day, one is in enabling sales and the other then is actually generating sales and so on. So it's not that different. But the challenge in some larger organizations is to get them to communicate together. But from your point of view, what should, regardless of the organization size, if you go into a company and you see that there's not much alignment between sales and marketing, what kind of tactics can they do, in your opinion, to bridge that alignment?
It starts at the leadership level, in my opinion. So if your leadership has suspicions towards each other, that
Yeah.
is just going to trickle down into the
Yeah.
team. And I believe it's important that leaders rotate. So if you as a marketing leader have never done sales, you should absolutely do it. Go there and spend at least 2-3 years doing sales, getting
Yeah.
no's, doors slammed in your face
Yeah.
to build that humility on what
Yeah.
it takes a salesperson to actually sell. And if as a salesperson you haven't done marketing, I absolutely recommend you do it, because only then you will see the power that you can use marketing for to amplify sales. At the end of the day, both of these functions drive sales for the company, drive growth. So
Yeah.
I would say leaders should totally rotate. They should rotate. And when they rotate and build that empathy to each other, only then that empathy will, in my opinion, trickle down to the teams.
From a business outcome, do you think that marketing orgs should carry a number then as well?
I find it funny when they don't. Like, what are you doing? You
Yeah.
have to have a number. When I was in L'Oreal, we had numbers, we had a target, and the sales team and our
Yeah.
target was the same.
Yeah.
It was just that their targets were a lot more granular. We had overall org targets, we had brand targets, they had the regional targets.
Yeah.
That's how it is, right? All those
Yeah.
accumulate up to the overall company target. So I don't see how marketing can work without targets. We have targets,
I agree.
here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree totally, but I find it's interesting in some companies where marketing they're not tied to a number at all. And even if it's something where it's a long sales cycle, at least it can be tied to a number, but then it's like, okay, it's the overall regional number or whatever it may be. But yeah, I think in a commercially linked focus organization, it seems kind of strange that you're not tied to a number. You'd be surprised how many organizations the marketing org are not. So yeah,
I know, and I've worked in those organizations, and
Yeah.
my pushback to my leaders always was, you have to give us that number.
Yeah.
Unless we are not part of making that number happen, we are not a serious contributor to growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so even with Cardboard, when we set a target for us, we need to reach 100 customers. It just seems so daunting, when you're at like 20 and you're
Yeah.
thinking, okay, we need to go to 100 customers, but that's a target we took. Then what we also did was we made sure to track source for
Yeah.
every company. So
Yeah.
that when we do the analytics, we can say how much of that came through pure outbound efforts, how much of that came through pure inbound efforts, and how much of these were multi, right? Like maybe you saw something, but you didn't convert, and then you came later, or you've been in the sales pipeline for a while, but you didn't convert, but you saw something on LinkedIn and you converted. So we have tried to keep that track, and that has made all the difference. So after 230 plus customers, now we see patterns.
Yeah.
We see that, yes, there is outbound sales has gotten us X percentage, inbound has gotten us X percentage, and there are all of these that are overlaps. So we know, okay, we're building something that feeds off each other. And that's also what we communicate to the sales team. It's not one versus the other. It's
Yeah.
both of these amplify their impact.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, and you can see who's contributing what. And if it's open as well, they can see as well. And it's useful for them, I guess, as well to see how it's helping their efforts also.
Exactly. And we have seasoned salespeople. So
Yeah.
they do bring a healthy sense of
Yeah.
skepticism. Like, we are going to do everything. And it's like, okay, you just have to have a lot of patience
Yeah.
and just see what the data shows you, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say that data replaces instinct, but the data kind of validates the instinct
Yeah.
sometimes that you have.
Yeah, definitely. Vidhi, where do you see this space going in future in terms of B2B? Like we talked a lot about thought leadership, about GTM as well, and how you have that structured and how you enable your sales team. But what's your predictions for the next, say, 6 to 18 months? What do you think companies, whether they're a startup, scale up, or an enterprise company, what are the things that they should be looking out for? And where do you see the B2B industry going?
The B2B industry has enjoyed a little bit what the B2C enjoyed in the beginning, in the sense that you took your customers for granted. And I think with a lot of the way people are changing and getting a lot more demanding, that you can't just take your customers for granted. They're going to stay with you forever. And I'm saying that because a lot of B2B SaaS has very difficult lock-ins sometimes. It's very hard to cancel a service because you have to go to 30 minutes of chat and like support and try and figure out, I just need to cancel the service, which is what it was B2C 20 years ago, right? So I think and I'm saying B2B SaaS specifically, because that's where a lot of the do it yourself and buy it yourself and all you need is a credit card. There are some practices that need to change.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping we are able to do with Cardboard. Bring a little bit of discipline on the business side as well.
Yeah, you don't have, and this probably sounds a bit bad, but you don't have like a list of like SaaS companies that it's like the most difficult SaaS companies to cancel your subscription, no?
We don't have a list, but I'm sure everyone who's listening has a story.
Yeah, I have a few myself. Edie, it was great to talk with you. If anyone wants to find out more about yourself, your content, Cardboard, what you're doing in terms of releases, what's new, what's happening, where are you most active?
So our website is where you can go find us. It's cardboard.inc. And you can follow us on LinkedIn. We are very active on LinkedIn, both as a company and as people. So you can follow the company page or either of us, and you will get a live stream of consciousness as it comes out.
Great. We'll leave all the details on the show notes as well. Vidhi, it was great talking with you. Thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much, Marcus. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Great. Thanks again.